brief description of how this event came about. I'm not going to get into the details for that, but for those of you that donated, thank you so much for donating. All of your donations are going to supporting WPFW radio station, a community-based radio station that has been tirelessly working on amplifying the voices of the voiceless. So we want to make sure that we stand in solidarity with them. So thank you all for donating. Before we get started, I want to thank Alfie for being here. Kawi, Tella, and Keith Mapeki will be joining us via Zoom. They're both Congolese activists, one based in Europe, another one here in the DMV area. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it to be here. So I want to thank you all. Before we go any further, because we would love to see all of you lovely people back here, I want to go over some of our upcoming events. Tomorrow we have a sip and paint. It will start at 8 p.m. That's going to be happening every Monday. Tickets are available on the website. You can go ahead and purchase it. It's a lot of fun. I've seen it happen. I haven't done it yet, but it's very great. On Tuesdays we have open mic, Artivism, Howard students. It's a jam session. You can come in here, pick up an instrument, and start jamming. On Friday we have a fundraiser for Haile Gerima's upcoming documentary film, Black Lions, Roman Wolves. Tickets are available on the website. The film is around 10 hours long, 5 parts. It narrates the story of the second Italian invasion in Ethiopia and the battle that went on for 5 years. So we would love to have you present in that. We'll also be going to be screening 45 minutes of the first part of the film. Haile will be here to discuss the film afterwards. So we have that happening. On Saturday, we have part 6 of our series honoring Malcolm X. It will be Malcolm X in literature. It will be hosted by Brian Gilmore and Dr. Nubia Kai, Kelly Mavis, Laini Mataka, and Kenneth Carroll will be here. We have many more events on the calendar. You can go ahead and check out our website. Everything else will be available on our social media. Without further ado, I'm going to invite Jordan Strick.
Hello, family. Welcome to Congo on Our Mind, presented by Haile Gerima and Sankofa Video, Books, and Cafe. If this is your first time in Sankofa, welcome. Sankofa was founded by Shirikiana and Haile Gerima and named after their revolutionary film Sankofa, the success of which made this palace possible. Sankofa is a lot more than a bookstore or cafe. It's a liberated territory within the belly of the beast. And there's so much work that happens here in this community to cultivate our minds and our hearts and our spirits for the work that needs to be done to make the world that we want to live in, rooted in books, films, and programming generated by and about people of African descent. I'm Jordan Cato Shudwick, one of the producers of the On Our Mind series, along with Abel Tesfaye, who will be handling technology and documentation, and Maritu McConan, who handles everything else you can think of and a lot of things you can't. Thank you for being here with us. In June, a month from now, I think we'll be at 1 year since our first On Our Mind gathering, which was Gaza on Our Mind. Haile envisioned Gaza on Our Mind as a platform for our community to gather to express ourselves, share emancipatory art, and proclaim the truth about the atrocious genocide in Gaza at a time when our voices were being silenced to prevent us from even feeling our feelings out loud, let alone using our voices to resist. What has emerged over time is a space where the people of our community have been empowered to come together and to share what we have to offer, be it art, scholarship, personal experiences, music, or just our presence. In solidarity with the intersection liberation struggles of our people who are fighting around the world against parasitic capitalism and imperialistic neocolonialism. After months of exclusively hosting Gaza on Our Mind, we expanded our gaze to Sudan with Sudan on our mind, Congo with Congo on our mind, Haiti with Haiti on our mind. This expansion has allowed us to not only deeply commune with the struggles of righteous people against oppression as individual struggles, but to also interrogate the ways these struggles interlock and intersect, to attempt to raise a collective consciousness of mutual solidarity, and to more profoundly examine our responsibilities for and within these struggles as people living as we do within the imperial core. Since our first God's on Our Mind, all donations raised through this series have gone to WPFW 89.3 FM Washington, Jazz and Justice Radio. Haile made this decision to honor WPFW's relentless advocacy on behalf of the human rights of people around the world. WPFW has been the loudest anti-imperial voice in Washington, D.C. for 48 years, and we honor that work here. WPFW and Sankofa are sister institutions in the maintenance of the spirit of resistance in Washington, D.C. If that's a legacy that means something to you, if you want to support this kind of work, you can do so by making a donation at WPFWFM.org, or you can talk to Maritu or me, and we strongly encourage you to support this essential work. It's too late. So today is the eve of Baba El Haj Malik Al-Shabazz, Malcolm X's 100th birthday. And we're blessed to be joined this evening by one of Baba Malcolm's closest advisors, the editor of his organization of Afro-American Unity newspaper, a pallbearer at his funeral, and his friend, Baba A. Peter Bailey. Baba Bailey is hosting an event in honor of Baba Malcolm tomorrow at the Blackburn Center at Howard, beginning at 6 p.m. I hope to see all of you there. Now I have the privilege and the honor of introducing our panelists for this who are on Zoom. We have Khalid here.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Great, amazing. Kawitela is a semi-lifelong Southerner and the son of Congolese immigrants. Originally from Nashville, Tennessee, he is a writer, a human rights advocate, a journalist, and a cartoonist. He's the co-founder of Kemi's Friends, a family-run nonprofit that aids displaced and impoverished people in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. His journalistic bylines include NPR, Alternative Press, Nashville Scene, and more, and he recently graduated from Georgetown's School of Continuing Studies with a master's in journalism. And we also have Keith Mapeki. Keith is a Congolese-born revolutionary advocate and creative designer whose vision aims to transcend and challenge political labels. Rather than identifying through ideologies, she defines herself by what she fights against: colonialism, capitalism, and imperialism, and by the liberation and role of Africa in leading a truly transformative revolution that is radical and rooted in ancestral wisdom, community collective imagination, and spiritual memory. That's the best bio I have. And last but not least, Elvi Banda. Elvi is a Kinshasa-born digital activist with the Future of Congo, a Congolese-led nonprofit dedicated to empowering communities, promoting education, and creating opportunities for displaced children in vulnerable communities in Congo. Elvi was a guest at our second or third Congo on Our Mind, and she really blew us all away with her clarity of vision, her passion for people's liberation, and her amazing talent for the forceful expression of undeniable truth. We're grateful that she decided to stick around and have gone from guest to organizer, constructing this panel for us this evening. Yes, sir.
I want to make sure something doesn't get lost. Sorry, when I first told my sister about this event, I said a very important thing that got lost because I really should have told you. I shouldn't have interfered like this. But today's event is dedicated to two identical brothers born out of different parents, Malcolm X and Lumumba. That's the dedication of today's event. I see them on stage.
Thank you, Shiloh. What I neglected to mention is that this year, in addition to being Baba Malcolm X's centennial year, is also Patrice Lumumba's centennial year. So it's another.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you to all of you for coming here and joining. And as was mentioned, this event today really, I hope, as every event that I want to participate in is to be a conversation. And we want to bring the audience as much as the panelists here because I recognize that for individuals who participate in these kinds of conversations or events, you all bring an expertise as well and an understanding to these conversations. So please feel free to be as active as possible. If there's anything that's talked about between the panelists that resonates with you or something that you want to add for clarity or just to elevate the conversation, please, I highly encourage that. All right, so as we get started with the event, like Haile said, this is really about the connection and the crossroads between the liberation of Congo, which Malcolm X saw really as a site to criticize and to really critique anti-imperialism and neo-colonialism. And from my perspective, I found that as in all conversations about Congo, we've really lost the road in that, and we no longer look to Congo as a site to have critical conversations about neo-colonialism, about exploitation, and most importantly, which undergirds what undergirds Malcolm's conversations about Congo is Black liberation and Black power and the Black struggle for liberation. And so I'll just pause right now and throw a question to our panelists about what their perspectives are on the relationship that Malcolm X had with Congo and the vision of what they see and how they would like to reactivate or reinvigorate that connection. And either of you can speak.
You can go ahead.
Hi everyone. My name is Kelly. Thank you, Sankofa, for having us, and thank you, LB, for monitoring this event. I would say for me, what I see with my apologies, LB. Can you repeat the question again?
Yes. So just basically, what did you see in your connection with Malcolm X's struggle for Black liberation and his comments on Congo?
I think for me, this might sound like a basic and weird answer, but I think for me it's just solidarity. Um, I think if I'm being honest, just growing up, I've been used to just not hearing Congo as much from other, aside from non-Congolese people. But even going back to Malcolm X and talking about the murder of Lumumba and just talking about the interconnected struggles between the African Americans, the U.S., and then Congo. I think it just goes to show that no matter the struggle, we're all in this together, and no matter how alone you feel, there's that, I guess, solidarity.
And Keith, what are your thoughts?
What I mostly was able to highlight about Malcolm X fight regarding Black liberation and how this can relate to Congo's fight as well is that he didn't need to have anyone's permission to see besides what is acceptable or what is valuable about Blackness or about being African. So in regards to Congo, I feel like this is very important to be able to imagine without having to ask for permission or without having to have any kind of blueprint that can make us decide what is most valuable or what is discarded about the actual history of our nation. And I feel like that's a very brave thing to do, and it's a very long process that we need to very consciously engage everyone in conversation like we're having right now. And that's something that Malcolm X, I think, had a very clear vision of what he wanted it to be, the Blackness, and how he wanted it to be passed down on history through like mutual connection with people. And that's something that I definitely would like to continue as a legacy that can everyone inspire into this path. a
African American, or maybe you're an African immigrant who lives in America or somewhere else in the world. Um, I think it's for me, it's just taking reclaiming beliefs and like roots and traditions and cultures that might have been lost in some way, shape, or form. Maybe you were taught that before, or it's just you never saw it before. But going back to your roots and finding solidarity with other people who are also reclaiming their roots as well.
And then I'd like to ask the audience for their participation, if you all have definitions of Pan-Africanism and what would be your definition.
I think that's a great question. Thank you for asking. I think Pan isn't like Africanism, the quality of being African, which is like very vague. But I think the most thing is having a shared identity, like finding the oneness that connects all of us. So, and I think also Pan Africanism for me is a way to destroy the borders, which are artificially created. Because like, yeah, it's a way to destroy the artificial borders which we created. And I feel like it's like it also represents the future for the continent. We're able to see each other as one people, one nation, one currency. I think it also, yeah, it like shifts the path for the rest of the continent. And I feel like unless we embrace the vision, which we're trying to embrace, even even Malcolm X before he died, right? He created the organization of Pan African, yeah, American, yeah, right. And this was like a year before he got killed. And like that's when he went to Africa to try to make those connections. I feel like once you know the colonizers or the imperialists saw that, that's when they figured out, we have to try to destroy it. So if we're able to take on that same vision and continue forward, I feel like that's where we can.
So the reason are there other submissions from the audience? You seem like you're thinking.
Some are sleeping.
Some are sleeping. If at any time a definition comes to you, please feel free to submit. But the reason why I asked this question was that when Malcolm X was talking explicitly about Congo and he was speaking to Black Americans and asking them, or he was raising the hypothetical question of why they should care about what's happening in Congo. What do Congolese people have to do with the average Black man in America? And I wanted to present Pan-Africanism not only just as ideology, so rebuking all, Western notions of capitalism and all these other things, but also as a physical place, right? And that physical place being Africa as a site of unity, but then also as a center to where, as you were presenting, we reject the hatred of Blackness. So when he talked about having to understand or wanting to understand what's happening in Africa to African American or to Africans, because it would be a mirror to what would happen to Black Americans as well. So what's happening across the continent, what's happening across the world also signifies the extent to which the empire in the United States of America has the capability to exact the same exploitation on Black people in America, but then also creating this unbroken chain, because I think oftentimes when we think about the diaspora, we think about it as being fragmented. And I think what he attempted to do in his connections and his talkings about Congo was to represent to people that it wasn't as broken as we believe it is. And that if we reconnect those mental links, those ideological links to the continent, and particularly to what was happening in Congo, we'll be able to not only see the value within ourselves and humanizing ourselves, because, and I can go on a tangent about this, but when we look at what's happening in Congo now, when we look at the sort of softening of African liberation movements, it's become something of a humanitarian crisis where we no longer see it as a struggle for liberation, as a site of exploitation, but we look at it as, oh, just something to pity, something to throw, funding, UN aid at, but we don't look at it as a site of struggle. And I wanted to present that because that's exactly how Malcolm looked at Congo. He saw it as a site of struggle. He saw it as African liberation struggle, and we need to put that image back out there, and we need to talk about Congo in the same lens so that we can activate this shared connection that we have across the diaspora as we're struggling in our liberation. We can see the liberation struggle that Congo has as well and reinvigorate all of us. So that's what I wanted to.
Thing in particular that Malcolm said about how deeply intertwined these struggles are, and I'm paraphrasing, when challenged about why is it that you're focused on Congo when we are struggling in Mississippi, he said, until you get Congo figured out, you'll never get Mississippi figured out. And so for him, it was truly one struggle. It's maybe separate battlefields, but in the same struggle.
Are there any thoughts that the panelists would like to add or the audience would like to add along that thread?
This is just a quick, a really like a quick random thought, but I'm trying to, I apologize, y'all, I can't see who exactly who was talking, but someone was saying about the, again, paraphrasing, you'll never get Mississippi straightened out down until you get Congo situated out. And I apologize again. I'm gonna keep on throwing out the word like connect, solidarity, interconnectedness, but I I think for me, it's in terms of like what's been going on with Congo or what's been going on in other places around the world. I think it's easy. It can be easy to kind of dismiss or like set aside it or like, oh, that's just one thing. But I think, sorry, I'm trying to collect my words. Um, I think it would really be really beneficial in people's best interest to realize the connected, how connected the different struggles of oppressed people are. So whether it's from Palestine or Congo or Haiti or Sudan, um, I guess the problems of one place isn't just
documented in many places. And we see the devastation that occurred because of that. We see how it has kept on haunting us and it has kept on dragging us down. And I feel like having that interconnectivity and understanding and realizing that Congo struggles are not on its own. They do not exist in a vacuum, and that the way to liberate it is to also recognize that the way that we were systematically dominated, um, how to say, like it can be it's not only it's not only isolated, right? It's something that has expanded. It will keep on expanding unless we do something about it. This is an ongoing game for them, and it's imperative that we act with haste, basically.
Yes, and
I think to me, Malcolm X understood that um, Congo is in the center of the economic exploitation of Africa. Center. I'm from Africa, but I know Congo, with 8 million people in primitive Belgian colonialism, lost their lives. That's the magnitude of like a Holocaust event. Did not happen in the vacuum. That is the center where imperialism has uh, its fueling tank, or it's a fueling source. It cannot go to space. It cannot have this new digital toys that all of us are the immediate subscribers of imperialism. Our cell phones are the witnesses of our implication. And so to me, Congo is in the center of our daily life. And Malcolm understood that, in my view. That's why he focused on it, not only Malcolm, but African Americans who even took the United Nations, uh, who, who breached the United Nations in the time of his murder, understood this was a critical corner of Africa. For me, I think we need to really amplify that. Imperialism cannot go to the moons without Congo. We have to really say it clearly. To me, they know it. That's how fierce they were. That's how they say kill Lumumba, because Lumumba is going to be an obstacle, because he was saying resources should go to develop Africa. Different economic orientation he was talking about, or about to bring into, not only Congo, but hooking up with all the Pan-Africanists, with Nkrumah, etc. So it's really very important for all of us to know, especially we young people who are so dependently married to the cell phone culture of imperialism. We are being challenged. There's no joke on this. There's no if and but. We can create excuses we want, but that's critical. So for me, I think these twin brothers who came at a historical moment in history, this is what I get out of it. For me, that's why also a lot of us who lived longer are hurt by these two people's departure and execution or assassination, because we're still stuck there. Those of us who are old are stuck in the murder of these two men. And the you young people have to inherit our stuckness, our trauma, and unleash yourself from our paralysis. If we were paralyzed, Mobutu wouldn't have done all that trampling in Africa and left alive after he got old. So for me, our generation failed in bringing about a revolutionary action. So what is the young generation going to do? Learn from our paralysis, but remember also know our pain. I raised 6 kids in America, my children. They did not bring no goddamn Jay-Z in the house poster. They did not bring Beyonce's poster in my house. They watched as they come into the house, they would see a big poster of Lumumba or Malcolm, big poster. And then when they go to the living room, they will see Lumumba's picture, because I wanted them to know the mortgaged history we have on these two people's assassination. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Haile. I think you highlighted something extremely important. So when I started this conversation and asking about Pan-Africanism and the definition of Pan-Africanism to set the stage for all of us, right? But prior to that, I talked about the softening of African liberation and how now it's become this site of humanitarian crisis and aiding in this place and aiding in one other place. And I think even with the definitions that we've received of Pan-Africanism, there was a lot of talks about identity. It was very, I think the correct word is intrapersonal, so the relationship of one person to another person, but there was very little discussion of the system and the relationship that Pan-Africanism has with the system, that it has with imperialism, that it has with economic exploitation. And one thing that connects these two twin brothers, as Haile says, is when Malcolm X talks about the liberation of African Americans, and he poses the question of civil rights versus human rights. He advances human rights because he's looking at the system in which African Americans are operating under and understanding that you have to fight this struggle beyond the American core that controls your ability to have civil rights to vote, etc. He wants to go beyond that to a larger international struggle for human rights. In the same way that what caused Lumumba to be killed is understanding the system that he was operating under in neo-colonialism with Belgium and wanting to take those resources into the nation's hands so that he could fight against this system. So I think for us to really honor and understand these two individuals as youth, people who are coming into maybe this revolutionary spirit or wanting liberation for our nations, we have to have a clear understanding of what we are up against. And when we talk about Congo explicitly, I think we have a duty, those of us who are advocating for Congo, to talk about it systematically, to talk about it in waves and in centuries. So Haile, you said something very important in the fact that you can't go to the moon without Congo. There wouldn't be vehicles with tires without Congo. We look at the history of Firestone. There wouldn't be these, Game Boy systems, etc. You look at this second wave of industry. It's all supported by Congo. We look at this new move now with green energy and AI. It's all supported by Congo. However, there's always a lack of explicit discussion about Congo in these conversations. And I think even us ourselves as activists for Congo, we relegate ourselves to this space where it's only the most explicit and overt of connections we make. So we can talk about the violence of what occurs, and we can talk about it from a humanitarian perspective and a humanitarian lens, and that's absolutely valid. But the secret conversations that are happening behind closed doors, the secret exploitation that allowed uranium to cause the destruction that it did during the Cold War, those are explicit connections that are being made on the global stage. I think we have to start making those more global connections, and we have to start looking at Pan-Africanism as a struggle against a system of colonialism, of white supremacy and imperialism that it's our active duty to fight against.
Yes, I'd like to say, as far as Pan-Africanism, the great John Henry Clark taught us that it's Pan-Africanism or perish. In other words, we must remove artificial barriers, as the first speaker, I believe, from the audience spoke about. And those barriers come with the concept of individualism, the concept that removes our cultural connection, whether it's formalized or not. We must connect on that level as a Pan-Africanist. And to do so means that we don't have to be taught to look at each other's struggles as a separate entity. It's not a separate entity. It is absolutely who we are. And I think that manifested, as Brother Haile said, in the UN, because at the time there was a situation that Brother Peter Bailey speaks about when there were some nuns, I believe it was, that were kidnapped in the Congo,
Yeah.
right? And then they turn and say that they want to send in external forces to liberate them.
The white nuns explicitly.
Yes, yes, these white nuns. And then we flipped around and I believe it was, if it wasn't the Congolese, I believe it was though, who came to the UN and said, well, if you have the right to go into the Congo and liberate these white nuns, we have the right to go to Mississippi and liberate the destruction and the lynchings that's going on down there. So that was a connection right there. Brother Malcolm also spoke about King Leopold's soliloquy, the book, where he talks about that exploitation, about the cutting, the maiming, and the millions that were, we know, the tragedy that took place there. So, and he absolutely talked about an internal issue with Shombi. He talked about the things that we need to identify internally as Pan-Africanists, as what we need to rid ourselves from in order to have the weight of Africa behind us. Because we're going into these battles viewing ourselves as individuals, viewing ourselves as individual countries, and not as collectively, the strongest people on the planet. And if we really are Pan-Africanists, we're going to manifest that. As it was taught to us by Garvey, as it was taught to us by so many of people with a collective view, we have to really change our mindset from individual to collective. And obviously, if you
Peter Bailey he was the journalist when Malcolm established his own organization after his death. He was his press man. He did the journalism for Malcolm for his organization he started after he left the Nation of Islam.
One of the things that I believe that we should do is to don't refer to African places as the Congo. It should be Congo, Africa, Nigeria, Africa, Ghana, Africa. We should always include Africa. Just like when you say New York, you say New York, USA. New York, California, USA. And we need to do the same thing. And recognize the different places. Always say, connect them with the continent. We're going to have a meeting about Congo, Africa. I'm going to write an article about Ghana, Africa. I'm going to do something dealing with Tanzania, Africa. We should always include that, the word Africa, the name of the country, and not treat it as some kind of individual thing. And I think that would be a part of one of the things that would help to that show our clear Pan-Africanism. If we refer to the African countries that way, and when you're doing writing, talking, teaching, don't say Congo, say Congo, Africa, Nigeria, Africa, Ethiopia, Africa, Ghana, Africa, Tanzania, Africa. Always do that. And I think that would be psychologically very helpful to our young people. We are trying to get them to understand that that the question of unity among people of African descent is absolutely critical to be ever going to get it. Simply not going to happen without unity. Thank you.
Thank you. Sister, let me add one more thing that's I think very important. Because there's two things, and I say this to young people to research further. There's two very important Pan-African origin of these two families, these twin brothers I talk about from different parents. Malcolm X comes out of a Garveyite parents, mother and father Garveyite. That's a clear history. But I also think, no, not well researched, that Lumumba's parents were Garveyite, because because they used to go to the Congo, the river Congo, to the port of their village, to the river, every Saturday or Sunday, if I didn't make a mistake. And they would wait because there was a news Garvey was coming to the Congo. They would go, would cook out everything, wait. His family used to go waiting for Garvey to come to Congo. So for me, this Pan-African seed in the family is critical to understand this people. Because the whole idea of Garvey is, Africa for Africans. Because we, up to now, Africa for Europeans and Americans is how we live. We're banished, we're refugee everywhere, we're not respected, we're called shitholes everywhere. And for me, to restore our dignity, that Pan-African topic is very, very important. The Pan-African idea, beyond Garvey into Du Bois and Nkrumah, Kwame Ture, etc. We have so much to connect dots in. So for me, for young people, I challenge young people to really research these origins that are key. Everybody skips this a lot, most people, but to me they're key. I was amazed when I, found information. Lumumba's parents used to go, and Lumumba as a kid went there as they waited for Garvey to come. That's a metaphor. It also is very important because Garvey was known all over. People were waiting for this guy to come to them. Every black person that had contradictions with white supremacy culture and political domination fantasized Garvey's appearance. That's all I would say.
So I have in line with that, because I think that brings us to a very important place when we talk about Pan-Africanism and we talk about Malcolm and Lumumba. Where, I will pose this to anybody who wants to respond, where does Africa lie in East or in the West? And I say East and West ideologically. So you know how we have this concept of the West. We also have this concept of the East. Where does Africa lie in that?
The center.
And can you expand by what you mean by what is the center?
I think even when we speak of the continent, we say the continent. And I think a lot of people know what we mean by that. I think that a lot of again, like we said, the different developments, industrialization, are dependent on Congo and the rest of Africa. And in that way, it makes it so that we are where all of the but I think that even when we speak of, when we look at the map, we are in the center, even if we know that this is not the continent. But yeah, for me, it's just an obvious thing, and that's also how I communicate. That's the language that I use when I talk about
I believe that we should not regard Africa and people in Africa. We should not say socialism, communism, capitalism. It should be Africa cooperation. Africa cooperation. Africa cooperation. And that way, we don't need to get caught up in these socialism or communism or whatever it all is. It's Africa cooperation.
Just wanted to add that, for me, for Pan-Africanism, it's like, again, a shared identity and culture. An experience is, for people of African descent across the diaspora. And, when I think about the story of like Asar and Set, in ancient Kemetic mythology, talking about like remembering, like Pan-Africanism is a way for me to plug into my sisters and brothers from the continent to help me pull together an identity that was stolen and was lost from me. To the point of, understanding to Malcolm's point that, the problems that we face is that African Americans won't be solved until the problem of Congo is solved because of the initial assault that, Africa, underwent from the labor being stolen. Like I remember hearing in a talk somewhere that they didn't just steal people people that were like unskilled. They stole people who had specific skill sets in nation building, right? And that's for me so core. I was actually looking up a quote from the French president, Jacques Chirac. He says, and this is his quote, "We have to be honest and acknowledge that a big part of the money in our banks comes precisely from the exploitation of the African continent. Without Africa, France will slide into the rank of a third world power." And that is a quote from the French president, the former French president, from 1933 to 2019. Well, he just died in 2019, but them acknowledging to the point about the coltan, the uranium that is the source. You need that for the nuclear weapons, and the reason why the U.S. is hegemonic is because of the nuclear weapons. So without Congo, the U.S. wouldn't have its power. Like, no matter where you are on the globe, we're all connected through the cell phone. Without the coltan that's coming from the Congo, we wouldn't be able to watch YouTube. We wouldn't be able to talk on our cell phones. Like, Africa is everything. They wouldn't have anything without Africa. So for me, it's just recognizing, why. I mean, and it just, for me, Pan-Africanism helps solve so many questions, because I remember growing up, before I had exposure to this, I was like, why is all this stuff that's happening to Black people? Like, what did we do? What did we do so wrong? And when we come into a knowledge and an understanding of like Pan-Africanism and just the history and the culture, and like I would tell my friends, from the continent, like, you're a representation of what I would have been had not my ancestors been brought here and enslaved. Like, you're no different from me, except your resources and your minds were colonized, and here in the United States, our bodies and our minds were colonized. So like, coming together, the power, that we can realize through the power of Pan-Africanism will really make us stronger as a people. So I just want
Sorry, I just want to make a generically comment. When it comes to Africa, West or Eastern, I feel like Africans have always been rejecting the premise that we have to choose. Many of the countries joined the non-aligned, the Organization for Non-Aligned Movement, right? So they specifically rejected East or West. They wanted to always be able to choose or make their own. And now, if you look at Tanzania with former president, he had African socialism, and again a different like framing of what socialism means. Leopold Senghor, he had negritude. Steve Biko had black consciousness. Kwame Nkrumah had Cushitism. Like, these are different philosophical and political conceptions of what it means to be African. And they've always resisted and rejected being either East or like either from the West. So yeah, that's to answer your question. But I also wanted to try to add like, a lot of people have talked about how Congo is the intersection of oppression, the intersection of everything wrong with Africa. But it's like, we've sort of looked at it from like an imperialistic perspective. Like, it's the nexus of colonization, yes, but also to me, it's the nexus of African failure, African corruption. I mean, SADC region, I think. You've seen like Zimbabwe invade, go to Congo, Rwanda, and like, even the region cannot solve Congo's problems. So like, it's like a canary bird indicating the health of Africa as a continent. If you can't solve Congo as Africans, you cannot solve Africa. If you can't solve the African continent, you cannot solve Black America. And so Congo is like the signal of how Blackness is doing, I think, globally.
So we'll take one more, and then, because I know our panelists may want to weigh in as well. So
fully agreeing with Isabella here, and I also wanted to, because I think that it's also an important part of this conversation, to mention that there is a book about the challenge of the Congo that was written by 1967, 68, and that I think is very interesting to read today, because it's basically, we are seeing that the challenge is still the same, and it also does explain that this is something that we need to be, or take position on, saying that Africa is that was the trigger. I think that sometimes with Congolese people, it's a little bit difficult for us to be in those conversations and recenter those things to us or to Congo because it does feel, a little bit, there is a need for introspection there and you think, okay, am I centering it to Congo because this is where I am from, where my family is, etc. And so sometimes personally I do feel self-conscious bringing those things up and it really helps me to bring it back to those words and again to really justify it through how heightened everything is and how, as you said, we can see where we fail as people, as Black people, what is happening to Congo right now is that we are at the very bottom of the chain when it comes to exploitation and imperialism and all of that. I do think though that Pan-Africanism also requires us to understand each other's struggles. So that means I, as a Congolese person, also have the responsibility to understand what is happening to people in the Caribbean, what is happening to people in America, to Black people in America, what is happening to people in South Africa. I think it's very important for us all to understand how white supremacy and oppression has put us down in all of those different places if we want to solve our issues together.
Then I'll let our panelists weigh in. I think the conversation went so many different places. So from wherever you can capture, if you'd like to weigh in.
Well, well, go ahead. I kind of going back, it's really, I don't know what else to say, but it's just honestly disheartening. It just, I one of the panelists was saying like it's just at the center of everything, and it's right. I mean, from the minerals, from being used to literally every technology known to man, whether it's just a car or the latest PlayStation or latest phone, and even beyond just like minerals and technology, just think about like in terms of just culture too. Whether it's just music, fashion, food. I think the way it's just for me, um, it's just heartbreaking in two ways. One, just seeing the exploitation of your people and just seeing it decades, just seeing this. And then two, just seeing, hearing about the just corruption going on in the country. But it's just, it's disheartening. I don't know what else to say. To hear that and realize that so many things just come from Congo. And in return, it's just exploitation and poverty, still suffering from the effects from colonization. Um, it's I don't know what else others to say than it's so many things come from Congo, so many things come from Africa, and yet so little. I feel like so little love is shown, and whether it's from the killing of our people in the Eastern region to um, having to educate maybe um, friends or family that are friends or classmates that might not have heard about, know anything that's going on in Congo or know the history between Congo and Rwanda or know really what the type of minerals that come from Congo. Um, it's disheartening and going back, it's Congo really is at the heart of everything, but people just don't. I like to, I like to believe people just don't realize that.
I wanted to add something. Basically, I wanted to first reply to Elvis' question at the beginning and also pick up on a few things that other people in the crowd had said. The question, if I remember correctly, it was about where do we see Pan-Africanism regarding West in general, right? And to that, I would say that I see Pan Africanism, I see Africa in leading, right? I think I see Africa in front. And not only leading, but also making an example of what liberation can truly be like. So for me, at least I see freedom has always been African. And I believe that revolution must be African too. It must be based to the core principles that has founded and has upheld our civilization, our cultures throughout centuries. And this is a very powerful way to challenge and disrupt Western ways of understanding power, binarities, collective thinking, and also a definitely powerful way to imagine a different outcome that do not have to be based on anything that has been set up historically by the West, because we want it or not, it has been set up by oppression, and it has been set us by denying the truth that we have always carried. So and to that, I really like the fact that one of the panelists said that it's irrelevant. No, it's not relevant, but that it doesn't have to be communism. It doesn't have to be Marxism. It has to be African, and this is a very fundamental way to challenge and also to redefine what we want that do not have to be based on anything that has been brought to us by the West, because we had our own systems, we had our own practices, we had our own way to define and understand the world based on cosmology, based on tradition, and based on the way that we operated collectively. So, us leading, African leading, in terms of, in regards of the West, is not at all about domination. It's not about any type of display of power. It's about setting an example of the things that we know we have seen so many times that the West lacks, but yet they denied just to maintain their own justification to keep themselves on top. And it also will put on us this no, restore on us this dignity that we so much lack, and this truth that we know that we have. We know that there's something wrong, and we know that we can find the answers. And us having that push towards to be in the spotlight, to have these conversations, to be engaging in ways that do not have anything to do with how we have been oppressed, but how we can move forward and how we can find a way to overcome that can honor our ancestors and can honor our history beyond being oppressed by these people. It's very important, and it can actually bring a lot of change and a lot of new discoveries.
I want to answer your question. So I want to try because I think it's becoming a very petty bourgeois gathering. One, as far as I'm concerned, we are not going to make the revolution because we are already hiding. I'm a professor hiding from Howard to here. Most everybody is a petty bourgeois. No petty bourgeois commits suicide. So let's not make it the agenda of the petty bourgeois, which reflects our class interest. In my view, whether we like it or not, the explosion in Africa, and specifically in Congo or anywhere, is going to be a working class peasant takeover because they're the majority. They're the majority who are at the mercy of imperialism and local petty bourgeois exploitation. No Europeans have ever succeeded to invade Africa without a stooge, a neo-colonial stooge or a primitive colonial stooge. At all stages, we have our stooges who helped Europeans to subdue Africa. Otherwise, Europeans are not omnipotent. They're not gods. They've been defeated in many places by the Zulu, by the Ethiopians, by the Sudanese, by the Nigerians. The problem here is we have a miseducated takeover of Africa. Those who went to European school, who Woodson Carter calls us miseducated Negroes, Africa or here. We think in the way we are molded, and we're not the future. So for me, two things I want to demystify. I would like it to be demystified. One is the Congo liberation is a Pan-African interest I have, not a transactional relationship. Congo is not going to do nothing for my next film. Otherwise, South Africa would have done it. Okay? Mozambique would have done it. Angola would have done it. Zimbabwe would have done it. I'm a very experienced person in terms of false liberation, petty bourgeois-led takeover of African revolution, etc. Even in the name of socialism. Angola, look at Angola now. Initially, it came as a socialist revolution, a Marxist revolution. Where are they? They're more decadent than the decadents themselves. They have out-decadented every class on the planet. In Zimbabwe, in South Africa. We know because we identify with them. Go to nightclubs in South Africa. They're the children of the Marxists who are decadent. So for me, let's not mystify it. Congo, I want it to be free, not on a transactional basis, but I want them to make revolution. You know why? Because that's where imperialism will be defeated. What my interest in Mississippi or Ethiopia is imperialism will be weakened in Congo because it's a European and American power that killed Lumumba, that killed Pan-Africanism, whether Nyerere socialism, African socialism, or actually Nkrumah's socialist revolution, all of it was killed by the Europe and America United Front, using the United Nations as a decoy, and using the petty bourgeois black people in America and in Africa. So for me, we're culprits. So for me, I would say this, our class interests should be examined. We should examine where we sit. I'm hiding in America, but I know the revolution in Africa will not listen to me. I don't want it to listen to me because I'm molded by Western education. But those peasants, those workers are going to explode and come out, be history, and they're going to make more mistakes, logical mistakes, and that's the African revolution I'm waiting for. That will come out of the oppressed people locally who cannot run like me and hide in America. Those revolutionaries will come because they are the ones who are on the brunt of it. They're the children of the raped mothers. They will make revolution. The danger is we should know and look at it not from transactional thing, that we want something from where we are. No, I don't want nothing. Because I told you my fantasy was really Mandela coming out, and then I want to make a film on him. The first letter he wrote was to a white filmmaker in Hollywood. Give permission to make a movie. So for me, I'm not disillusioned about the false prophets. Even Lumumba, had he come to power, at a certain point he would have to face his own people if he had gone into his middle class tendency. So as far as I'm concerned, I think let's not speak from our vantage point of view. Students, professors, Americans, even if we're working Uber, we're not that class. Those people are merciless because their oppression is so severe and merciless, they do not listen to any of your idea of ideology. So for me, left or right is not the issue. Africans will determine what's going to work for them. Okay? They will work for. I hope they incorporate the sister's point of the African culture, the spiritualism, because every time we lose that, we become a displaced human being, regardless of our ideology. Sorry, I took long to.
No, I think the reason why I told, and I hope you all see what I'm attempting to do in this conversation is that, actually Keith and I talked about this, previously, is that oftentimes when we engage together, we're often talking at one another, we're often saying the things that we know, but we're not engaging in critical conscious raising. So the reason I posed the question about, west or east, because there are all these broad conversations happening about where the world is going. Is it going towards, capitalism, the Western model, or we're heading towards new superpowers like Russia and China and communism? But lost in that conversation is Africa. And a lot of thoughts were raised here today on what Pan-Africanism means, what Africa means, where Africa rests, and what our personal beliefs are about the importance of Africa. But the reality, as I thank you, Haile, for raising it, is that I think there was a major disruption and a major stop of what Africa is ideologically as a home and physically as a home. So Africa was supposed to be the site for the Black identity to come in terms of economic advancement, in terms of agricultural advancement, in terms of land acquisition and possession, to be a site of the Black identity as a counter to Western imperialism, to colonialism, right? But we've had a disruption of that. So as much as we want to believe ideologically in Africa or believe in ourselves individually in terms of our identity, I think there's a lot of real examining that we have to do of ourselves and our positionality and where we sit. We have to recognize, as Malcolm criticized, the Mobutus in ourselves and the Mobutus in those that we interact with, and the Mobutuism and the Chombeism in the work that we do, how we're engaging in certain systems, because there are times where we find ourselves making certain concessions because we feel, okay, well, it'll get me closer to this goal. But is that goal actually connected to African liberation? Is it connected to the liberation of Congo? Or is it from someplace a personal advancement that you want to make because it fits in with your ideology? So that's why I really pose that question, because there is no answer to the question. Africa neither lies in the West nor in the East, and I don't think currently it has a place where it exists. I think we want it to, we believe in it as people who are Pan-Africanists, or we believe in the Black identity, but I think there is a critical stopping in the work that we've done to really cement that in our collective imagination. There is a collective imagination that when you say West, we know exactly what that means physically, we know what it means ideologically, we know what it means economically, we know what it means socially, same with East. But when it comes to Africa, there's going to be a lot of, I'm trying not to say this in a bad way, but there's a lot of emotions that's tied to our personal identity, that's tied to our esteem and belief in ourselves. And while that is extremely important, Malcolm talked about that to a certain extent, but there is a real functioning physical location where the struggle for liberation happens, and we need to get back to that place. And then I also want to complicate the narrative that we often have about the richness of Congo and the richness of Africa. In all actuality, raw minerals are in abundance in Congo. That's an absolute fact. But the technology that we see, it doesn't run only because of the raw minerals. It runs because of the refined minerals. And there are no refineries in Congo to extract the wealth of these raw minerals. So when we change the narrative, when we change the framing of that conversation to, oh, Congo is so extremely rich and it's giving so much, why doesn't it have this, why doesn't it have that? That's a very personal and emotional conversation. When we change it to, where are the investments in refineries? When Congo is having negotiations with whatever trade partner, where in that is there an acquiring of advancement in workforce development, where we're getting refineries so that we can extract the wealth that belongs to us? That becomes an economic and political conversation. And that's why we have to start shifting the way that we're thinking about all of this. Any thoughts you want to add, Mr. Jordan?
I don't have anything to add to what you just said. I do want to note that the sister mentioned Frantz Fanon earlier. It is also Frantz Fanon's Centennial birthday year this year. So Malcolm X, Patrice Lumumba, Frantz Fanon, 2025.
I want to just share a perspective as a Black North American. Um, in talking about Pan Africanism, I think, and I'm really glad, Elvie, that you brought us here in the conversation, because thinking about the moment that we're in internationally is very, very critical. It's not a coincidence that you see all of the fires that we're seeing in Africa right now. It's not a coincidence that Sudan is being torn apart. It's not a coincidence what's going on in Eastern Congo right now. It's not a coincidence what's happening in the Sahel and Somalia. The list goes on, right? We're seeing a different phase of imperialism of the global order that Malcolm and Lumumba did not have to confront. They confronted something different. But the interest in Africa still remains, and the interest in Africans still remains. I think there was a sister who said earlier, when slavery was happening, how intentional they were on who they took and who they brought and who they stole. I think she said it was people who were critical to nation building. They're still stealing, folks, right? If they see a politician that they like, they capture them. If they see a young professional who's really good at engineering, they get them into their company. And that's that is the process that's the evolution of imperialism that we're seeing. It doesn't always have to be a man with a gun and a flag to come take your land. It's your potential, your intellectual potential, your creative potential, and your potential to build a nation in this arena of global transformation where now the UAE wants a stake, the United Arab Emirates. Now China wants a stake, right? So what I'm trying to say is this. I think it's very poignant that Malcolm goes to Africa, travels the world, right? And when he comes back, his message and the institutions that he builds aren't geared towards sending everybody away from America to the rest of the world. Certainly, he says, please go travel, see what's going on. But the Organization of Afro-American Unity was to build here and to tell Black Americans, your work is here first. If you are to be any use to any of our family anywhere else, you have to get your situation together. You have to build unity where you are. I think that to me is like so important right now, because when this thing collapses, and it's collapsing, are we going to be prepared to build something in its ashes? And I think that is, we have to resist. Yes, we have to confront, of course, because imperialism is not gone. But more than resist, this is a time to build, and this is a time to lead, not just resist. And we really need to start looking outside of our education and our conditioning of what does building, what does beyond this actually look like. And we're only going to get there if we work in unity. I think one of the panelists brought that word up when we talked about that. But what does unity look like? It doesn't mean everybody going to Africa and dressing the same and doing the same thing. It means finding what you're good at. If you specialize in this, by all means, get your stability in this economic structure, but figure out how you can be a contribution and an asset to your people when the time comes. And when the Congolese call on you, when the Sudanese say, hey, we need this, can you help us? We're ready as Black North Americans. And just to keep the conversation going, I think we do get a little paralyzed, especially in the West or folks who are in the diaspora, when we don't have a Malcolm figure, we don't have a Lumumba figure to represent us on a national or international stage, we get a little confused or lost into how we can help the struggles that we see taking place around the world. So I guess my question is, what is the best way for us to activate in a Pan-African way when we might not know everything that's going on in Africa, or we might not have the means to travel or to send money or whatever? That's my question for the group.
And I'll just add on a little bit to not pushing back, but just adding on that when we talk about the adaptation, which imperialism adapts like no other, right? At the end of Malcolm's time, he was at that place. They saw a bit of that, not in the same ways that we're seeing it, but his critiques on Chombe, his critiques on Mobutu really talked about neocolonialism taking on a black face. He talked about the black liberals and how they're oftentimes doing the bidding of white supremacy and imperialism. So we're seeing remnants of that. And if we go back and study that more critically, I think that's what we've lost, this idea that we center ourselves against imperialism. We don't just center ourselves based on the color of our skin or whatever national identity that we hold. Just because you are a black person doesn't mean that you believe in black power, capital black, political meaning of black power. I think us going back and actually understanding what these terms mean, what black revolutionary thought really is, when we go back and study these things, then we can have a better lens in identifying those who are next to us and if they're on the same path that we are on. So not during, I think oftentimes we have this understanding that Malcolm X, Lumumba, they were the only people that existed at the time and there was no opposition to what they were doing by other people who looked like them, by other people who held the same spaces that they held. They had a coalition of the willing that they were working with. They weren't trying to necessarily save everybody, right? And I think they focused on what their ideology was, what their principles were. They massed and mobilized based on that, but they had a coalition of the willing. And I think sometimes we get stuck in this idea that we need to save everyone and we need everyone to be on board with everything that we're doing, and that's the only way that we're going to make any sort of movement. I think we need to have clear understanding of what our ideological bases are, and that's where we move from.
Well, I want to add something. I think we have to be clear. Free yourself from imperialism and colonialism or neocolonialism. Free yourself. When you do free yourself where you are, you're contributing in weakening imperialism. I think it's, what I'm worried about is this transactional sentiment. I don't expect nothing from nobody. But if the beast is attacked everywhere and weakened, that's the transactional or anything we can get from each other. To me, for example, in the US, plantation system is morphed into modern plantation system. Basically, what is the new plantation system? It's no more indigo, cotton, sugar. Now it is sport is a plantation. Entertainment is a plantation. When the brother talks, was talking about, in terms of, no, let me not, I'll go there later. But if you take fashion is the new plantation. And black people are in it from hair to foot. Okay, hair is a plantation, the new plantation, the new business that is actually keeping black people in slavery in a higher situation. Of course, the sport gladiator in the plantation gets paid bigger than the enslaved African in the primitive slavery period. Now, it is moved, and the problem here is it's something we are cultivated by. We like it. Cell phone, for example, for me, its functional thing is not even discussed and examined in our community. I take it as the new shackle to my students at Howard. I felt they were shackled the minute cell phone became around. It's like you buy a shackle now. It's not put on you, but you buy a shackle. And a white boy made a movie now called Spy in Your Pocket. That's about the cell phone. For me at Howard, my whole problem with my students was this voluntary shackle by using their parents' credit card. This itself gives you the kind of class we have created. So as far as I'm concerned, free yourself from being owned as a gladiator. Free yourself. That contributes to from South Africa to North Africa, East and West Africa. Because the same oppressor, these are the filling stations. Okay, so for me, work where you are, fight where you are, and then the enemy is weakened. And as I said earlier, they're clear. The same oppressors mutated into a high tech now. We're finding the new players, but in the old game. You know, this South African white boy in the White House is not new. We've seen him. He was a Belgium in Lumumba's time. Belgium boy from Brussels. Okay? They're not, this white supremacists don't have new game, just perpetuating the old game with a new class they create. And I think our role is critical. You know, I'm harping on this. I think we are to examine ourselves, not examine only the oppressors, imperialism, American CIA. No, examine yourself. The CIA now is recruiting linguistically Africans by and large. Before they didn't even consider Africans even qualified to go there. Now the biggest suppliers for the CIA and FBI is now Africans, because they're seeing the battle intensifying and they want to hijack the language through catching the surveillance, cell phone, etc. So to me, I think as the finger should come up. If it lived longer this time, imperialism, it's because of our weakness, because our class fracture is serious. The most educated Africans are subservient to miseducated power structure. We keep going back in refilling it, as the young brother was saying, the press. We were refilling back. We're educated, we become soldiers of that. And then we try to confuse the African struggle by creating dichotomy of left, right, Marxism. Marxism is not actually good for Africans. We don't know. A few places it's experiment. No, even Cuba, they wouldn't allow it to be experimented. Why don't, if they were ideological kind of confident about capitalism, why don't they let Cuba live its life? Why sanction Cuba for medicine, for food, everything? Don't we see them fail in building Marxism in Cuba? Why don't they let them experiment till they fail? So we don't know yet. We only know the mythology of the propaganda of the West. We don't know the ideological things that I know the world is not supposed to be eternally indebted to imperialism. Human beings are better to come up with a better, equitable system. That I don't know. But the other part of it, I want to go back to is I think, to me, the African masses are not going to listen because I went to Harvard or Howard or Stanford. They're not going to, because the conditions are creating monstrosity of rebellion. This rebellion has no eyes because the oppression is so, how should I say it, so big. You know, what you're seeing in Congo now, the rape alone just kills you. It makes you not walk straight. To our mothers, the kind of rape women are experiencing. Is that going to let us? No, it's a bad curse on our humanity. And we're going to be in trouble for it. Although I go back now after recognizing the sister who got raped, she said so many interesting things. I hear it, I'm touched. Then I go back to what restaurant should we eat? Mexican today or no Spanish or no Chinese? This is where the class that is being completely monopolized by. So let's remember one thing. We are not the long-term runners of this. The revolution is going to be coming out of people that they don't have your vocabulary, they're not from your dictionary, they come, in fact, create a new dictionary, new language. And let's be ready for that kind of change everywhere and embrace it when it comes.
And just to add on to the question that you asked at the end about where do individuals go when they feel as if they have no Malcolm, they have no Lumumba or these, these figures. And I think sometimes it's a detriment to frame revolution in that way, that it relies solely on an individual leader, because it erases the experience of individuals who worked in solidarity, in unity with them, right, to make the things that they did happen. Because when we see Lumumba, for example, he came out of and I have to translate this from French, so I'm not saying it correctly, but he came out of the National Party movement, right? And the people that he was around, although one betrayed him, Mobutu, but there were other individuals that he worked with collectively in raising consciousness amongst one another, writing letters and newspaper ads, and just that it's a collective work. And I think when we rest it all on the laurels of one individual person, when that person dies, the revolution dies with them. That's what stays in our mind, right? We no longer have Malcolm, we no longer have Lumumba. Who do we look to? The revolution is over. The revolution is dead. And I think that's a real Western mindset to have, this extreme individualism, this single story, this heroic figure, this Alexander the Great, right? We as Black people, we as Africans have to let that go, and we have to understand that the work that those individuals did, they did collectively. The ways that they started, the ways that they raised consciousness was in situations just like this. And we have something that really bothers me, honestly, is that we have a greater advantage than what they did. With this, right, we're able to connect with so, like, the irony of the one thing that kills Congo, being able to connect so many people to better understand Congo, to better raise consciousness about Congo, is not being utilized effectively. How we have all the tools at our disposal, so what is it necessarily that we're lacking? It's an ideological failing.
I just forgot one thing. The rappers also on in this a new plantation. So
Right.
I want the rappers to know, rappers are now rapping for imperialism,
That's very true.
economically speaking. These plantations are now where we're. It's not a primitive plantation, but the new sophisticated, highly digital plantation we are all enslaved by. And by the way, what you said is really what I forgot when I was, that's the point I was gonna bring in. Thank you, you're right. To me, they did their job and not wrong. What they give us is, to me, what they get from the movement.
the panelists answer as well. But we addressed this a little bit early on when we talked about individuals not having a clear understanding of a systemic fight. So I think we're not looking at it as Africans, we're not looking, or as Black people globally, we're not looking as all of us in our political Blackness being in a struggle against imperialism, neocolonialism. And I think it's exactly because of that that there are people who don't show up and they don't see the connection, or they feel like, well, this doesn't impact me necessarily, or this has nothing to do with me. I don't know anything about Congo. You know, it doesn't touch my immediate life, and it doesn't touch their immediate life because they don't see themselves struggling against imperialism. And I think when people wake that up within themselves, that's when they'll start to see why we have to be in solidarity and why all of our oppressions are connected. Because that phrase has been used a lot post October 7th, but I don't think people actually know what is connecting all of our struggles. I don't think they can point to the system that has the UAE in Sudan under this neoliberal guise of like RSF versus SAF, and then people will frame it as, oh, it's an ethnic conflict. It's just these Africans not being able to govern themselves, and that being the same model that's being used by the European Union vis-a-vis Rwanda, vis-a-vis the proxy army M23. So when they start to see the tentacles of imperialism and the tools that it uses and how it operates around the world, I think that's when people will start to care. So I stopped looking at it as a sort of personal affront, and I stopped being emotional about it to a certain extent. And I just recognize that it's because there are a lot of people who are not engaged in the same struggle that I'm engaged with. And so my goal now is finding people who are and aligning with them, and then seeing how we can mobilize and do something effective in our time that we have here.
I think that driving to solve that issue was so much the brilliance of Malcolm X. Like he kept towards the his apex, towards a lot of part of his life, he kept driving closer and closer and closer to that core. Like what is the real issue here, and how do I address that? It's not by just addressing this situation maybe in Harlem or Mississippi. Where is this? Where is the source of this? And as he chased that source, he where we find him is at the Organization of African Unity meeting, and the starting an organization named after it, which had the explicit intention of being an observer or part of, closer and closer to being a part of the OAU itself. That that way he was able to not build coalitions or like solidarity, because sometimes those words don't really encapsulate the spirit, like building oneness. That was part of why he was so dangerous and had to be eliminated, because he was really bringing people together around the world in an era where that was what was so brilliant about that era. When we were watching a film, Mama Shrikyan's film, Footprints of Pan-Africanism, last night. And in that film, there's a woman who talks about how in the era of African liberation in the 60s, Ghana was close to everything because there were planes flying to Tanzania, there were planes flying to Congo, there were planes, everyone was connected. It was one struggle, and people really felt that. They felt it. It wasn't like an intellectual or strategic exercise. They felt that sense of oneness. And I think when we have that, we won't have an issue where, you know, for the Congo event is Congolese people, but for the Sudanese event is Sudanese people. People will understand they need to show up for each other because they'll just feel like it. It wouldn't be like a strategy game. They'll just understand this is where I need to be. They'll be driven automatically. You know, and I think that's what Malcolm was doing and putting into our minds. And it's such a shame that that's where it doesn't get told. You have to really dig into Malcolm and study before you get past the layers that, you know, mostly we get to with the film and the autobiography. I think most people don't really go past that layer, and so they don't really get to Malcolm's internationalism because those sources don't really allow you to understand that. And so that's why I think what we're doing now is so important. Why Baba Bailey's event tomorrow is so important. Why it's important for us to continue throughout our lives, but certainly this centennial year to really dig more deeply into who Malcolm was and what was he trying to teach us, because it's so much deeper than what most of us think.
I apologies in advance. I wasn't able to hear the beginning half of the question. Um, but going off the last speaker, I I guess I just wanted to say just this one thing. Um, you in terms of just like learning about the different struggles, you don't have to be Congolese to like resonate with the struggles of Congo. You don't have to be Palestinian to resonate the struggles of the Palestinians. You don't have to be Sudanese to resonate with um, the struggles of the Sudanese. But what I'm trying to get at is the way that you can think about or would change. It can't. I think it just starts with just learning and just educating yourself on what's been going on. I can't even say decades, but just honestly centuries. And like LV was saying, just finding that togetherness. Because in terms of just Pan-Africanism or just liberation in general, it isn't, at least to me, it isn't just a hyper individual thing. It's something that starts with together, but that starts with just um, learning. And there's no shame on just, hey, I don't know this subject, or hey, I don't know what's been going on in this place or this time. Um, I think personally for me, it's just learning about whether it's just what Pan Africanism is, or what's going on in Congo, or what's been going on literally any oppressed place. That's the starting point. Um, but yeah, and thank you for everyone who was speaking before.
I'll be moderating.
No, I was because I think Keith has a delay, so I was waiting to see if,
I think the sister is coming next.
yeah, Keith, are you still on?
No, no, no. It's
Yes.
the caption that is the main. He's done.
She's
Okay,
there.
no, Keith has a
Oh,
delay.
Keith?
Keith, yeah, she has a delay sometimes, so that's why I was waiting to see if she wanted to ask.
Oh, it's can you hear me, guys?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So I don't know if I can add something if someone that has this want to say something or.
Yeah, so there was a question that was posed in the audience about your perspective as a Congolese person and how you feel about some individuals not engaging in solidarity or not engaging in unity with Congo. And how do you feel about that? And what do you think can be done so that there can be a greater collective effort for the Congolese liberation?
Yes. So I actually really enjoyed this whole conversation that we had, and it's actually made me remember a really new word that I learned quite recently called palabre, which is a very African, a Central African word that very much it's a way of talking, right? But it's a way of talking that is done in community, and it's done like not within disregarding individual ego and basing on reparation, healing, and actually understanding. Yeah, you talk with people, you get to reach a goal that doesn't have to be specific, but it is done together. And I feel like that's a key point in this, right? I feel like we definitely have to have more conversations like this, not because not because it's going to change someone's mind, but because it's going to enrich ours. And I feel like that's more important than anything. I don't I don't see myself looking to change people's mind that are not already somehow on the fence to be made, or they don't have like the this predisposition to do it, right? But I do feel like we kind of grow powerful, more powerful if we are able to engage in these tough discussions. We are able to have this type of like imagination, right? We are able to expand our concepts and the role that we play in the liberation of the people that we are fighting for, and that kind of be and we cannot include everyone in that fight, unfortunately, and not because it's not going to not because it's not it doesn't benefit us, but because not everyone will understand why this fight is being fought, and not everyone will going to be able to know how deeply you have to commit to this type of path in order to reach to the goal that we are envisioning for ourselves. So the people who do not really see the points are not able to connect the dots and envision the greater picture, or they're not able to empathize on a deeper level with the struggles of the different people in the global south. Perhaps they are not meant to be. Perhaps they are not meant to be included, right? And that doesn't mean that they will not in the future see it as we see it. Is that right now we should be focusing on the people who we know we can organize, we can create something together, we can talk, and we can imagine, right? And and it's how to say it, it's a tougher it's a tougher mission. It's something that it will have more result if they see that they are able to be convinced by our actions rather than just by the theory of our vision. Because yeah, not everyone is going to see this, and not everyone is going to be able to envision things that we do. But a great way to start is just to start together and then let everyone else join.
I think that's all just.
No, we gotta close it, because in our house.
I was gonna close it. I was just
Yeah,
waiting to see
yeah,
if there were
before you,
any
before
thoughts.
you, before you close it, or no, I would prefer you closing it,
Yeah.
and then because I want to thank you, and I also want to announce, I want to tell the two of you, right now, we're doing a critical analysis of soundtrack to Coup d'etat. It's very important for people to really look at a film in what they call film analysis, narrative analysis. And so you're going to do, you're going to analyze on your own, the two of you. And then the meeting is going to revive this week coming. So we watch it. We've seen it 3-4 times already. But we'll see it more. But individually, you work and you're going to measure all the footages and timeline of how many times Lumumba appears, his story appears, his family appears. If nothing appears, you make, but you have to count the footage number, how many minutes, space, because often ordinary folks do not know there's a battle for presence. In movies, if you look at early African American movies, when we study them, we measure how many minutes they are allocated, because it's always white people who dominate the screen time. Even in a negative stereotype movie we're talking about, it's good to analyze what we are in their narrative, how many minutes, how many space, and what space are we occupying. And then you'll do jazz. All the jazz, you'll time it, who the jazz musician is, biography on the side, etc. Okay? Okay, now you can do your thing, and I will do the last one.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I just wanted to thank, first and foremost, thank Haile, thank Sankofa, and thank Jordan for giving us the space and allowing us to host this conversation. And I also want to thank the panelists for their contributions and to thank all of you in the audience for your contributions as well. I think, as Keith mentioned at the end, it's extremely important that we continue to have these conversations, whether it's something organized like this or even just among friends or people who are like-minded, and to remember first and foremost when we're talking about Malcolm X and his relationship to the Congo, it should bring us to a place where we're currently framing, using his framework to critique the systems that we're engaging in each and every day. So we're starting to look more critically at Western imperialism. We're starting to look more critically and identify neocolonialism and how it appears in our daily lives and in the systems that we're fighting against, and also starting to recenter Black liberation and Black revolutionary thought, because we've lost all of that critical analysis. We are not free, we're comfortable, right? But we're not at all free. We're still trapped within these systems, and any wrong move in one direction will land us in the same place. So we have to understand that we're in an adaptable space, but we're in some of the same conditions that these leaders are in. So let us not be too comfortable with where we sit. Let us not be too comfortable with our education and our language, and even a setting like this is just a place on the road to getting towards liberation, but it has to activate us to something and find whatever your activation point is. So thank you everyone for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for organizing it. Seriously, I want you to do more. This is not going to be just a one-time event, because you have to take over. We're tired here. So you gotta come with new energy. And my brother and my sister on the Zoom, you guys can organize based on a book, on the new information, or a new cultural artist from that area, from the region. Because it doesn't have to always be, political discourse. It could be cultural discourse, because I feel music, cinema, and poetry would do. In fact, one of the things we're having is called Malcolm X and Literature. Amazing poets are coming that night here, and I hope we could share it with you. So please suggest anything you want to do done. This is your place. We call it Sankofa, a liberated territory. It's a small one, but this is one we liberated after we made the film Sankofa. And so please, you're welcome. And folks, I wish you saw the film called Pan-African Footprints the other day that he was talking about. I wish you saw it. But if you're interested in organizing a group of people, we can have a showing for you. You really have to do it. It's a must film. It's very important. So the other one, in terms of coup d'etat, soundtrack to coup d'etat, we're going to have a very interesting experimental discourse. There will be presenters. The film will be suggested you see it, or we see it together, or we discuss first, see it together. We have not decided how to do it, but we've been doing our homework then to bring the film, because oftentimes we're spectators of white expression, our history being told always from a white point of view. We do not understand the battle that goes in. I'm doing a film now on the Italian-Ethiopian War. The footage to buy my own ancestors from Italian imperialists. I paid $40,000 for 3 minutes. It took me 30 years to make that film. So we do not know how much, for example, on Lumumba, how many of the footages African filmmakers from Congo even could not secure some of the footages that film has. But we want to understand the politics of that movie, the aesthetics of that movie, the narrative battle for our story kind of discussion. And do not miss it. We'll announce it by our email. Get our, what is it called?
Newsletter.
Huh?
Newsletter.
Yeah, but what do you call, how do people call? I'm not
So you can,
in this world.
you can sign up for the newsletter. There's a iPad in the back corner where I'm pointing, and then you can also come talk to us at the back, and we'll get you signed up.
And so anyone, usually we also have, cultural people who do rap. The Haitian guitarist, did you catch him? Oh, he's an amazing guy from Haiti, on our mind. The next our mind is what?
Haiti. Haiti.
Haiti. Is he coming? He's an amazing guitarist. I'm serious. It's an amazing experience. So please keep in touch. Bring your friends, and ask us to take this space over and do what you want. We will argue with you like hell, but it doesn't mean you could not impose your idea by sitting here, bringing a panel together, etc. Thank you for coming. Drive safely.
Just want to very briefly, so, because of Husseina's question, we talked about this a little bit earlier. This is Sudan on our, Congo on our mind. We have had this phenomenon doing Congo, Sudan, Haiti, Gaza, where there's this balkanization. There's people who always come for Congo, but they don't come for Sudan. People who always come for Sudan, but don't come for Gaza. Our goal is to get people to really understand the way that Malcolm wanted us to understand, the ways that these struggles are one struggle, not related, but one struggle. The only way that we do that is if we get people to show up for each other and add to this conversation and this community dialogue about the ways in which we are the same. And so I really encourage you, if you came here specifically because it's Congo on our mind, come specifically for Haiti on our mind too, Sudan too, Gaza too. It's one struggle. Thank you.
This is very important because I earlier was speaking about people coming on tribal basis. You know, if it's my tribe, I come. If it's her tribe, I don't show up, kind of thing. I was making a joke about Ethiopia, for example, what Peter Bailey was saying, say Congo, but Africa, touch it too. It's serious, but some of young people do not know because they take for granted because this generation is more Pan-Africanist by culture. You guys knew, you know, the Africans that come now from Ethiopia, they know the characters in the African American culture. When I came to America, it was Negro America first, they're called, which means like they were not even from Africa, they were sprouted from here, the meaning of it. And also, Ethiopians used to, you know, when white Americans ask Ethiopians, because that's all we hanged around, because many African Americans knew Ethiopia because they were marching for when Ethiopia was colonized by Italy, Italian fascist 1935. So it was not, they knew, Garveyites knew us, but Ethiopians would say, I'm from Ethiopia. Where is Ethiopia? It says it's in Africa. No, it's not in Africa, because Ethiopians would say, like, we're somewhere in Australia, somewhere. And white Americans would tell me when I first came. So Ethiopia, yeah, it's somewhere in Australia. No, I said, I myself didn't even know Africa very well, so I was like trying to say, no, Ethiopia is in Ethiopia. And I would say Ethiopia, Ethiopia in that context. So it's not a joke. When Peter Bailey said, put Africa attached to where you come from, it's really educational for a lot of people. But again, in terms of, you know, attendance, I feel, especially people who talk about Pan-Africanism and don't show up on the other, you know, events, especially East Africans are, I think, the problem, in my view. Oh, Nigerians have their own club. I've never seen them come here. So announce it for us. Tell everybody. We just want to learn and study and discuss. Thank you for coming again.
Yeah, they can't see you.
It's very big, actually, not
He's
people.
waving, but
Wave it at the laptop.
no,
You can?
Take care, folks, okay? Thank you for everything. Thank you for everything.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. Bye, y'all.
2 weeks. No, yes. Say your name? Yeah, Friday.